Emotions are complicated, so let's talk about them. Hi guys, it's me, Mex. So today's video is going to be kind of unplanned and unscripted, and we're just going to go right into the skinny of things and get deep and dirty.
Shut up.
Mental health. Some people have it to some degree, other people have it to lesser degrees, and at some point in your life, like it or not, you will probably struggle with mental health. There's multiple reasons for making this video, but we'll get to those at the end. So we're just gonna go ahead and dive right in. As a young weasel who had not grown into his length yet, I came from a very dysfunctional household. I'm not gonna throw my family under the bus too much here, because my mother and I are still very close, but there was a lot of unusual things that kids shouldn't have been exposed to going on in my childhood home. But ultimately, a lot of people can relate to that. A lot of people can relate to coming from a broken home or a small family, or a family that's, just kind of the black sheep of the family, just like the redheaded stepchild, if you will, just not in the good graces of the in-laws or the grandparents. And that's the kind of home I came from. Of course, I don't want to go into too much detail on this because ultimately this boils back down to how did this affect me? And let me just say that I don't know if it really did. It could have. There definitely were some things that happened in my childhood that could have attributed to the way my brain is wired today, because that's the time where you learn the most, where you have the most influence over your brain, and things can last for a lifetime. So I'm not going into massive detail on this because I don't think I'm ready to do that on my YouTube yet, but let me just tell you that I had a very irrational, unusual fear that if I was to point at and talk about, then you guys would probably think this is like such a mundane thing that you wouldn't bat an eye. Like, you'd be like, oh, that's weird. Well, growing up, I had to, this was just an everyday thing, so I had to kind of, face it. But as a child, I was afraid to face it, but seeing other people do it around me just fine without any hang-ups, without any fear, made me think, oh, I must be an alien. So I went through my childhood thinking I was maybe not quite human or not like other people. Now, of course, that fear that I had, I started trying to overcome it when I, became self-aware enough as a teenager to realize, you know what, this is a flaw. I should work on that flaw. And that was around age 13. I started, trying to perform the task that I was afraid of more. And just, ignore the fear, face it. And I did. Over time, I got more comfortable with it. And now it's, just, I don't think about it much, but still talking about it in this context, when I go into specifics, is a little uncomfortable for me. So we're not going to do that right now. I'll be honest, I grew up feeling broken, and you can couple this as well with the fact that I'm on the asexual spectrum, so you expect certain things to happen around age 12, 13, and none of those things happened, and then I started having some really weird things happen, and I found the furry fandom as a result. And while I've had varying degrees of attraction to mostly guys, when I was a teenager, that was completely absent, and I was developing crushes that I thought were just unusual. And of course, growing up feeling broken, you have to, as an adult now, convince yourself that you're not broken. So when I finally came to with my sexuality and, started taking pride in that, of course, I decided to go ahead and throw myself through another hoop and leave the state as soon as I turned 18. I mean, there were a multitude of reasons why I felt like I needed to at the time, and I don't invalidate those reasons because at the time they made sense to me. So I left the state of North Carolina, where I'd spent my entire childhood and all my teen years, and I moved to Illinois, which was, definitely a far cry, because in North Carolina, you got these mountains and these sightseeing and hike, and then you just go to Illinois and it's like flat. Very, very flat. In Illinois, you have 4 seasons. You have cold, 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 and construction zones. So getting used to that up there was a little off, and it wasn't long before some of my coworkers at some jobs that I had were starting to take note that I was very unusual for an 18-year-old. I acted very weird, and I said weird things, and I did weird things, and I was just like, it was almost like I was a 12-year-old in like an 18-year-old's body at this point. And so eventually I started going to this little group home down the street from my workplace, this little place where you could go in and get like discount therapy and stuff like that. So I started talking to somebody, and I only ended up going to like a couple of sessions, and they diagnosed me with major depression, which was my first major diagnosis. Now here's where things got a little complicated. Time and time again, I would try going to therapy, and every single time I would go, it would end up where I would run out of money, or something would come up and I'd lose my job or insurance, or more often than not, it was through my workplace EAP, which of course gives you basically a limited amount of free sessions before you start having to pay for them full out of pocket. And, you know, being somebody who couldn't really afford health insurance, this didn't really mesh well with me. So as soon as I ran out of my work EAP, I would just have to basically stop seeing the therapist before any work could get done. I was coming into my own. I was experiencing a little bit of emotional maturity, but I still think that there was a lot to be done. A lot of times I just really did feel like something was wrong. I would go through these waves of depression in and out, and I would just get this really overwhelming sense of dread or despair, and it wouldn't be for anything in particular. When I had a hyperventilation episode when I was 16, my mom rushed me to the hospital, and the guy in the room told me a really good analogy. So your body's prepping for there being a tiger in the room. There's no tiger in the room. And that really spoke volumes with me, because that's truer than I believed it to be in the moment. So we have a broken healthcare system that doesn't really teach you much about the importance of mental health, and makes it so you basically have to have insurance to be able to go, and makes insurance unaffordable, or otherwise makes you jump through hoops to be able to even get coverage. You'll have some free handout workplace things that'll give it to you, but only a limited number of sessions before any real progress can be made. What does this all lead to? Going in and out of these therapy offices, not being able to make any real ground, and just having to live with your thoughts and your brain unchecked. January 2018 might just be one of the worst experiences of my life. So I had just completed a very, very stressful move. I was commuting to a job that I worked overnight that I hated. Let me go ahead and also add that I had been working third shift overnights for the last 2 straight years. I had been vaping like a chimney for a few months at this point, so my body, chemistry was changing from that. Hey guys, just a quick disclaimer. The next part of this episode, we go in depth into describing panic attacks and derealization attacks, and if you are not privy to having those feelings brought up, I would skip ahead to this timestamp. But if you're okay to continue, here we go. So one night in late January, I was just sitting at my computer, and all of a sudden, everything stopped feeling real. Everything started feeling like it was shrouded behind a plate of glass. Everything stopped feeling normal. Something was wrong. But I couldn't figure out exactly what was happening to me. My mind was rushing with hundreds of thoughts a second, but time was not moving. Trying to describe a derealization episode is like trying to describe what dark tastes like. All I can tell you is that all of your emotions shut off, all of your attachments to the world shut down, and the only thing that's left is fear. Lots and lots of fear. It's one of the most bizarre and terrifying experiences you can have, and I had several that week, as well as, coupling panic attacks as well. So this was the first sign of an actual massive psychological problem. I, at this point, knew I needed to do something, but I was not in a situation where I really could do anything. I did start going to a therapist, but it was very expensive and I could not afford it. And I didn't have health insurance because I was still between jobs. 2018 and 2019 were really hard in that regard because I was working a lot of subcontract jobs, and subcontract jobs notoriously do not have healthcare. So that particular episode was about 10 days long, and I went through about 14 panic attacks during that time. Many of them were also derealization attacks, or panic attacks that stemmed from a derealization episode. And then the episode stopped and everything just felt normal again after about 10 days. So this brings me to derealization and depersonalization disorder, a disorder classified by having derealization or depersonalization attacks, oftentimes coupled with panic attacks, which are usually cyclical and can go anywhere from a few hours to a few weeks, depending on the person. In very, very extreme scenarios, they can go on a month or a little longer. Most people in their life will experience depersonalization or derealization at least one time in their life. But when you start fearing the next attack just from how bad the attack is, that's called panic disorder. And that is now my official diagnosis. After my second mental health crisis in October of 2020, I went to the hospital, and they finally gave me a medication to help combat it.
Wow, medication!
Since then, we have gone through different medication combinations. We have switched some out and tried some new things. And right now I'm on a regimen that does seem to be working pretty good. And I'm also now going to therapy to help alleviate a lot of these issues. And let's talk a little bit about therapy. So a good therapist is very comfortable to talk to. And sometimes you do have to try out a few different therapists in order to find the right one that works for you. Right now, I'm working with a therapist named Robin, and she is very, very fun to talk to. She is trained in cognitive behavioral therapy, which is what I'm probably needing, but it's very conversational. The way we talk is just more of like just having someone to talk to, just opening up to somebody and not being afraid to say what you need to say. Unlike real life, where you can sometimes be afraid to talk to people because you fear how they're going to react. Having a therapist to talk to is absolutely paramount to helping alleviate a lot of the psychological stress that you feel. I highly recommend therapy. To anybody that's hesitant about therapy, please just give it a try. At the very least, you have someone to talk to. That's the best. That's the biggest thing about it. Yes, the for-profit medical system sucks, and me and my therapist both agree on that. We both mesh with that because she hates that this is for-profit because people need this kind of treatment. It's a necessity in our society. But ultimately, over the course of all these therapy sessions, over the course of all these attacks, all these hospital visits, everything I've been through, there is one thing that this always comes back to. I am a hypochondriac. Let me show you what that is. Oh, my arm's itchy. I'm gonna fucking die. Yeah, it's the constant invasive thought that you are going to die. You are going to get sick and keel over. You are going to unalive. You are going to drink the bye-bye juice and take a forever nap. But yeah, combating this one has been pretty hard because it's just a constant invasive thought. And one thing that cognitive behavioral therapy, at least the methods, have taught me is that thoughts, especially invasive ones, are just that. They're thoughts. They come and they go. You can either fully engage with it or you can be a bystander to it. Not every thought warrants your full engagement.
And don't get me started on the nonstop thinking yourself into a circle over that, and you end up spiraling with all those just thoughts that just keep feeding off of each other and building onto one another. And I can tell you, the worst time to have a negative thought about something is when you're in the middle of a mental health crisis.
And that's one of the hardest skills to learn. That's a learned ability, and I'm still practicing it to this day. It is very hard.
Another thing I want to note is that when I was a kid, I used to have this anger issue, just a little bit. My parents did admit me to anger management, but here's the thing was like, in school, I would freeze up and be afraid to fight. I would be afraid to show that anger, but at home, I would lash out really easy. I would throw tantrums, and as I got into my teen years, I was very cold, and I would hold grudges, and I would get really upset and have very emotional reactions to things. As I got older, one of the quotes that stuck with me was actually, there's a first responder I used to follow on Twitter that was in the furry fandom. He tweeted some basic training techniques, and it said that your first response is your most emotional, your second response is your most logical. That actually struck a chord with me because for a while I had been responding to things only emotionally without putting any logic into my feelings. Nowadays, I'm a lot quicker to assess when I'm feeling emotion for something and be able to determine whether or not I can make a sound response in that moment based on my emotional reaction. Oftentimes you have to wait to be able to make a good response to something. And that was one of the definitely valuable lessons I learned over the years as I've gotten older. And definitely a contrast from when I was a kid.
I think one of the biggest issues we have with mental health today in our society is the fact that we're all so online and we are all on the outrage machine in some way, shape, or form. Whether we're active on social media or not, we're all playing the game of the outrage machine. So it's very easy to see how things can lead to very massive and sudden depression and a feeling of just general powerlessness.
Concern and concertancy.
The entire reason I made this video, guys, was because I don't want other people to feel alone like I did. As a child, I felt like an alien. In my teen years, I felt broken. As an adult, I felt behind. All of these comes down to the same thing: your core beliefs. Your core beliefs are the things that you inherently believe about yourself. And those are hard to change because they take a lot of practice. There's a lot of speculation that people will talk about, hey, if you say yes all the time, you'll become a more positive person. Or if you talk about yourself in a more positive light, you'll start to believe it. Well, that is true because that's core beliefs. It affects your core beliefs in doing things like that. Every morning lately, one thing I've tried to do, I haven't done it regularly, but I've tried to do it. I've tried to make it a regular thing. It's just when I wake up in the morning, I try to take a few seconds just to be grateful that I woke up, that I have the people in my life that I do, that I have the success that I do have, as meager as it is, just being grateful for who I am. And that's a really hard thing to do because sometimes it can feel fake. And when you first start doing it, it will feel fake. But those small actions do speak volumes. Over time, you will start having a more positive outlook. There are 3 things that you need to know when it comes to mental health. Even though you may feel it, even though you may have thought it your whole life, even though you may have some serious issues that keep you from being able to go out and experience society. Maybe you have to stay inside because you're super agoraphobic because of your massive psychological issues. You are not broken, and anything that's wrong can be fixed, treated, or accommodated. You are not broken. Another thing that's really hard to realize: everyone is messed up. Everyone, no matter who they are, no matter what kind of front they put on, they all have an internal struggle. Everybody goes through it. Everybody has a different struggle that they deal with. Some people may have the same struggles they go through, but everybody has an internal struggle. And 3, this is one of the hardest skills to learn, let me tell you. You are enough. You don't have to be anything more or less than yourself. You are not your career. You are not your art. You are not your hobbies. You are not your chores. You are not your car. You are not anything except you. And that's enough. And if somebody wants more out of you, then maybe that person isn't enough for you. And that's all there is to it. So this was very slapdash, and it was extremely hard to go over this without a script because I wanted to over-explain everything. So let me know what you thought of this little TED Talk down in the comments section below. If you like this video, please throw a like on it, share, subscribe, and if you're feeling super generous, please feel free to make your way over to my Patreon. I have $1, $5, $10, and $25 tiers available. I have made a change recently. Only $1 will get you 48-hour early access to these videos. So you'll get to see the videos before anyone else for just $1 a video. And of course, we have other perks for the $5, $10, and $25 tiers as well. Look forward to seeing you again in the next video. Bye-bye!